Yesterday, Russian dictator Vladimir Putin dangled the idea of meeting Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy for the first time, but only at what he would call the final stage of negotiations, whatever that might be. Now, this sounds conciliatory, but if you've been following this war, if you haven't been living under a rock, then you know that when Putin breathes, when Putin talks, he is lying. And that when he speaks softly, there is often a bayonet held just behind his back. During a press conference at the St. Petersburg Economic Forum, Putin was asked if he would meet Zelenskyy. His reply, roughly translated from the Russian, was as follows. "I'm ready to meet with anyone, including Zelenskyy, but only if it is some kind of final stage, and not to sit and divide endlessly, but to end it." He also threw in that classic line that has been a point of Russian propaganda since really the beginning of the war and has been repeatedly parroted by their propaganda outlets and talking heads, useful idiots in the West. That Zelenskyy is somehow the dictator here, that he is not legitimate because Ukraine is not holding elections. Ukraine is not holding elections because it is in an existential fight for its survival. And within the Ukrainian constitution, under martial law, until the threat has passed, there are no elections. This is a normal part of how democracies function when they are under martial law. It is impossible, one could easily argue, to hold an election in a country in which nearly 20% of it is currently occupied by a fascist enemy. To demand that Zelenskyy hold elections while ignoring the fact that Putin has actually never fought a free and fair election is double standards, is whataboutism, and plays directly into the hands of Russian propaganda. For democracy in wartime, legitimacy isn't just about ballots. Zelenskyy does maintain a 60-odd% approval rating in free and fair polls. It's about consent. And Putin knows that if he can cast doubt on Ukraine's leadership, not within Ukraine, but abroad, he doesn't need tanks to chip away at its support. He has words, and as I've said, it's working. And this latest move by Putin, this offer to meet Zelenskyy, but only at the very end of the matter, that's no olive branch. That is pure propaganda framing. Putin is setting up the idea, as he has done before, that he is the reasonable actor, and that when peace fails, because Putin will make it fail, it's not because Russia refuses to negotiate, no, it's because Ukraine or its supposedly illegitimate regime isn't ready or, for whatever reason, refuses to have peace. This is a lie. At every opportunity, Zelenskyy has said, yes, we will negotiate, yes, we will have a ceasefire, and it is Putin that has obfuscated, that has delayed, that has lied. And while these negotiations for a ceasefire was going on, it is Vladimir Putin which repeatedly bombed Kyiv. And at this meeting, Putin said that Trump is right in saying that the war in Ukraine might not have happened under his leadership. This is a clear play at stroking Trump's massive ego and manipulating him, which Putin is extremely good at because Trump looks up to him. He looks up to his strongman nature. He looks up to his total authority in Russia. Trump has been disappointed in the military parade that happened on June 14th in DC, not because of the lack of strength of American military power, but because the soldiers didn't seem to be taking it seriously enough. They weren't scary looking. They were waving to the crowd. Some were smiling. Some were marching questionably. It wasn't the dictatorial parade of everybody in lockstep that he was imagining. It wasn't the ranks upon ranks of human objects that he feels he can control. That's what he was craving. And that's why he's so easily manipulated by Vladimir Putin, and why Putin has done this latest statement. It's really quite transparent. And whenever Putin has offered negotiations or a ceasefire, it has been immediately followed by rains of ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and suicide drones on Ukrainian cities. I remember I was in Kyiv over the Easter ceasefire, which Putin offered. 30 minutes after I saw the announcement hit my feeds, the air raid alarms started sounding in Kyiv. It's a lie. It's a lie meant to deceive not the Ukrainian people, because they know it's a lie. It's a lie, ladies and gentlemen, in the West, meant to deceive you. Do not allow yourself to fall for it. And as for Russian attacks on Ukrainian cities, which have only gathered in brutality and in volume in recent weeks, Putin said at the St. Petersburg Economic Forum, the strikes did not target residential areas. It was aimed at facilities of the defense sector, plants manufacturing military hardware. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I've been at ground zero for Russian attacks on Kyiv, and I filmed what I saw. I'll play you some of that footage now, and I'll also play footage from more recent strikes. Strikes that directly hit residential areas. Strikes that included the use of cluster munitions, which are basically useless against a building and are only used to attack people. People in the open. People running for shelter, or people running to help those who've just been hit. It's another barefaced lie. In Putin's world, black is white, up is down, water is dry. That's what he would have you believe, or better yet, he would have you believe that nothing is true, that nothing is sacred, and that nothing is really real. Because if you believe that nothing is real, then everything, as far as he's concerned, is permissible. That is what he is trying to persuade you of, ladies and gentlemen. That is why he is saying Zelenskyy is a dictator. That is why he is repeating these false overtures, which are always followed by drones, by bombs, by obfuscation when he's met in the middle, or further than in the middle. Ladies and gentlemen, this latest announcement at the St. Petersburg Economic Forum is another piece of Russian propaganda and another lie, and it exposes weakness. If the Russians were doing well in Ukraine, then they would be advancing on Ukrainian cities, and then they would be repeating the atrocities of Bucha and of Izium. They are not doing well. So they are trying to undermine Ukrainian support where it matters. They are trying to undermine Ukrainian support in the West, because they know that the Ukrainians are not going to stop fighting, because they know what will happen to them if they stop fighting against the Russians, and they know what will happen to them if the Russians take over. There's a reason why, when they initially invaded in 2022, they invaded with tens of thousands of body bags and mobile crematoria. Bear in mind, this is for an operation that was meant to last 3 days to take Kyiv and 10 days to take the whole country, where they thought they would be greeted with bread and salt. Why would you bring 10,000 body bags with you for such a short and sharp and probably quite bloodless operation, unless it was never intended to be? Ladies and gentlemen, do not believe Vladimir Putin's lies. Stand with Ukraine. Remember, democracy is non-negotiable. Slava Ukraini.